Meditation for me is something that appears in almost all of the world's religious and spiritual traditions. And so whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and indigenous practices, there is almost always recommended a time that people take to sit and reflect or contemplate or be silent, be quiet, and listen. And to me, that's what meditation is. Different forms of meditation have different goals. So one form of meditation might have the goal of transcendence, meaning that you are no longer locked into this individual, time-limited, embodied self, but you recognize yourself as a much larger being that may be taking a temporary human form. And by connecting with that larger aspect of one's being, they are healthier and happier, and they're also kinder and better people, kinder to other people, better people. Other types of meditation have to do with observing sensations. So you might observe your breathing or observe your body sensations, listen to what you're hearing, notice what you're seeing, and just be aware. And something about that simple awareness of our sensations allows us to deal with the challenges that arise in everyday life in a better way, both challenges that come from the outside and challenges that come from the inside. So just like the Christian tradition has, let's say, the 7 deadly sins of, greed and jealousy and all these things, we all have those kinds of aspects of our being. By meditating on our breathing or on our body sensations, it starts to generalize. When I have a jealous feeling come up, I can observe it rather than being driven by it. There are many, many kinds of meditation. So some are about observing our experience, some are about transcending our experience. These are 2 different ways, but there are probably infinite ways of meditating. There's a study that I did on a form of meditation called non-duality, non-dual meditation, where one simply sits with the presence of just being, that I'm not an I, that this is not necessarily a separate chair and a separate body. And through this meditation, people begin to feel at one with everything. They also can still feel their individual self, but they feel this sense of oneness at the same time. Another form of meditation is centering prayer, where this is a Christian form of meditation, where people sit quietly, they repeat a phrase to themselves, maybe it could be love or Jesus is with me or something along those lines. But the most important part of that meditation is that they are repeatedly consenting to the action of God in their lives. So this is very different than a Buddhist meditation, where you would be observing your sensations, there isn't necessarily a deity. Whereas in this centering prayer meditation, there is a deity, there is a loving God. And some people find that much more real for them, more aligned with how they view reality. I don't know as much about indigenous practices, let's say in Africa, but I would bet money that there is a contemplative meditation part of those practices. And so I think it's actually a human function that people naturally would move toward meditation in their everyday lives if we were just living naturally. We live a little bit unnaturally, where we are bound by time and work schedules and productivity and all of these modern ideas. And even when people are children, you'll see a young child look off into space with their mouth open, and their parent will say, you know, what are you doing? You know, come on, get back to work, do something. And that's probably a natural meditation. We have a overactive cortex, frontal cortex. So we're always thinking, planning, scanning the environment for threats or danger, going after what's rewarding, judging, evaluating, comparing. It's like we have a computer in our brains, and it's just constantly running all of these analyses over and over and over again all day long. It's part of what makes humans so capable of building buildings and scientific advancements and all of these incredible inventions. But the downside is that it keeps us from being. It keeps us from simply being. We're so used to every new experience, we categorize it and say, oh, that's like this or that's like that. I know what's happening here because you look like this and that looks like that, this calculating. So when we can calm the calculating and just observe what's happening right here, right now, in the present moment, then we start to have a much deeper and richer experience of what's actually real right now. In addition to that, we are integrating our body, our emotions, and our mind instead of being just tick, 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 chattering away. And all experience happens in the present moment. Every single experience we have happens now. Everything that happened before now is gone. Everything that's going to happen is not here yet. We have absolutely no power in the past or in the future. We only have power right now. So the idea that we spend so much of our time thinking about the future or thinking about the past doesn't make sense. So we'd like to have much more of our attention in the present moment, when I'm eating a meal, when I'm with my child, when I'm in love with someone, when I'm in front of the ocean, even when I'm in pain and having a difficult time. If I can really be fully present for it and not resist it, it moves through much more quickly and naturally than when I'm trying to fix it and manage it and change it and mess with it. So to me, that's the power of meditation. People have a sort of inherent concern or fear of these states of consciousness. I don't know if that was always there. I have a feeling, and what I've learned about indigenous cultures and the ones that survive to this day, let's say Aboriginal Australians, that these altered states of consciousness are just as real as this state of consciousness, and they are considered to be as important in terms of being sources of information. And whereas the modern world, I think there was a period of time in the Dark Ages where society got very, very superstitious and very not, now we call it fake news, right? It was all about demons and possession, and there was the Inquisition, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed based on religious beliefs in that, and the Crusades. And I think there was finally, all of modern society said, you know what, forget all of that. It's hurting us, we're hurting each other. Now it's going to be about the facts and about science and rationalism and left brain. Let's get rid of all this other stuff. And that was probably good when it happened, because we were in a sort of not a good place with all of the superstitious things leading everything. But now we may have swung too far in the other direction. And so now it's time to bring the power of science and rationality together with the power of inner knowing, intuition, these states of consciousness. And I think if we can create a rapprochement between these two, that is what's going to help humanity move into the future. Well, I think that society has, in most ways, moved forward, has advanced. There's enormously less suffering on the planet than there used to be. 100 years ago, we had a life expectancy of an average of 35 years old. There was rampant disease and incurable, half of women died in childbirth. I mean, these are all incredible advances. And we've been able to advance because we had such powerful mental processes happening. But there are unintended consequences of all of that ability, all of that advancement. And so we just need to balance it. It's like balancing the mind with the heart and the soul and the body. Bringing those things back into right balance is actually going to be more helpful. And I think that's why there are now yoga studios on every street corner practically, and meditations cropping up everywhere. It's on the cover of national magazines, and we're hearing about it all over the place. We're all starting to recognize this is not a sane way to live. The way we're all living is not sane. And so that's, I think, what's exciting to me about where we're moving with this research is we're bringing back the heart and soul into business, into medicine, into schools and education. The more we can do that, the better off our society will be. And of course, without going too far, we don't want to go back to the Dark Ages. We want to keep science and rationality and inventiveness and technology. All these things are good too, so it's more about integrating them now. Well, the Be All Foundation, thank goodness, has done a lot of work to fund and support researchers who are attempting to bring together these, what have been thought of as mystical experiences or, extraordinary experiences with science, to really train the lens of science onto these experiences to see what they reveal about the nature of reality and human potential. The Institute of Noetic Sciences has done this for over 40 years now, to bring together rationality, science, scholarship, thoughtfulness, careful, critical thinking to these fundamental building blocks of people's ideas. Yes, so there have been, luckily, thousands of studies now on meditation, and there seems to be no doubt that for many people, meditation has a beneficial effect on their minds, on their bodies, on their relationships. However, up until now, there have been very few studies on specific aspects of meditation that are important to many, many people. States of oneness, states of energy. People have these experiences of energy shooting through their system, Shakti or Kundalini, it's called in some of the traditions, Chi. And this energy, hardly anyone has looked at in meditation. Even in the meditation traditions, they'll say, just ignore that, that's just a side effect, don't worry about it. But there may be something really important about that. There are these experiences people have of feeling interconnected with other people at a distance, or having a sense of spiritual transmission from a teacher as they're meditating with that teacher, or in a workshop, or even sometimes at a distance. So with the support of the Be All Foundation, we were able to conduct a study investigating this anecdotal experience that people report called spiritual transmission. And in Hindu, sometimes they call this Shaktipat. This is where a student will be working with a meditation teacher, yoga teacher, and will feel an important experience that seems like it's being transmitted from the teacher or through the teacher. People might say they feel very blissful, ecstatic, joyful. People might say that they feel a deep sense of love and compassion and things being right with the world. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes they're full of energy and they feel shaky and weird and they hear things in their minds and they just have this really transformative kind of unexplainable experience. And they think to themselves, oh my gosh, what was that? What happened? And that leads them into wanting to learn more from the person. And so we were trying to see if we could capture this in the lab. So we brought in a spiritual teacher that many people had said they've had these experiences with. Even us as researchers, when he first came to visit, we were all like, that's interesting. Like you can feel a vibration in the room when you're with this person. And then we found someone who looked very much like him but was not a teacher at all. And we used him as sort of the fake teacher. And we would have people sit in the lab with the real teacher and the false teacher, and we'd be measuring their brain and body sensations, also what they reported they felt happen. And we did find that in this very small pilot study, we only had 8 subjects, that many of the people had differences in their physiology and their reports with the person who was the spiritual teacher versus the one who was not. So that really means, I think, that we need to look deeper into the ways that people are connected, not just spiritual teachers, but everyone. Definitely, yeah. Anyone can do meditation as a sort of workout for the mind. And I really recommend that if people don't find the type of meditation they want at first, they keep looking for different types. I worked with a woman named Lauren Artress who was responsible for bringing the labyrinth, which was, the most famous one is the labyrinth in Chartres Cathedral. This is an image on the ground that's sort of like a maze, except you can't get lost in it, you just follow one track. And so Lauren Artress brought this, and other people, but mostly her, brought it to the United States and other places and uses it as a walking meditation. So you walk in, you walk around all the circles, it takes about 30 minutes or 60 minutes, but the whole time you're just staying open to your footsteps on the ground. Now Lauren said it was almost impossible for her to sit quietly and meditate. She was too anxious, too agitated, too distracted. She never reached a point of refuge, which many people do after they meditate for a long period. But when she started walking meditation, it really worked for her. So there are many different types of meditation that I encourage people to explore. I think it's a very good thing that there is an increasing awareness across society and around the world of the need for yoga, which the purpose of yoga is bringing together mind and body and heart, meditation, all of these other kinds of practices. There's a big resurgence right now of psychedelics in medicine and research. And the reason is that people who are doing this research very carefully, very safely, very thoughtfully in major hospitals, having people monitored while they're doing these psychedelic sessions, people report that these sessions are among the top 5 most important experiences of their lifetime. And a year later, 2 years later, they still say they're the most, this is up against weddings, childbirth, so these are very important experiences, and there is a way that we can bring them into current medical care, current medical thinking. in ways that have potential for really healing people. I was really happy to do this study with Kim Penberthy at UVA, University of Virginia, where we collaborated from 2 different coasts, looking at meditators who either had meditated in the past or that were signing up for meditation classes so we could follow them into the future. And we were looking at stress and well-being, psychological, emotional, mental, but we were also looking at their performance on what we call psi tasks, things like precognition or presentiment, or being able to count the number of balls in a jar, but only when it's flashed very, very quickly. So we would call that intuitive knowing, and various other kinds of tasks that people shouldn't be able to do. But that might reflect some sort of psychic ability or clairvoyance, something like that. And our theory was that when people meditate, they sometimes can perceive an element of reality or a layer of reality that is outside of space and time, or not constrained by the typical limitations of space and time. Many meditators will report having this experience of, I felt like there was no time. I felt like there was no boundaries no edges to my body or to my awareness. And this experience of oneness or non-duality, we thought, well, maybe they will have more paranormal experiences. And when I say that, I just mean things that seem to be outside of reality, like connecting with someone who's deceased, or knowing something that they had no way of knowing. And so we did this study where we looked at the meditators and we compared them to a group who weren't meditating. And we did find, in fact, that what we expected, of course, their stress reduced and the normal things that we find when people meditate. We found that they had greater reports of paranormal experiences subjectively. They told us more often these kinds of experiences would happen. Unfortunately, we didn't see any differences on the tasks that we put together. But we showed that you can study it, and you can use tasks like that to study it. And the trick is, it's either not true, it doesn't affect the tasks, or is there a different way we need to do the tasks? So we did it before an 8-week meditation course and after. Maybe we want to do it right before they meditate and right after. There's a lot of different possibilities now, but the fact that we were able to create a protocol so that they could do the study was also helpful. Yeah, because we have done studies at the Institute of Noetic Sciences looking at things like presentiment or mind-matter interactions for many, many years. One study that we did with support from the Bial Foundation looked at electrocortical activity in meditators versus non-meditators. So we were going to play a very loud sound or a very bright light flash. So you imagine you have people sitting with headphones on and sitting with sunglasses on that have lights that can go on the inside. They also have EEG all over their head that's measuring their brain waves. So what you should see is after a very loud sound is played, there's activity in the auditory cortex. When a light flash comes on, there is activity in the visual cortex. What we looked at instead is, did these meditators have a little bit of activity in their auditory or visual cortex before the light was shown or the sound was played? In other words, was there some aspect of them that could see what was coming before it happened? And what we showed is that the people who had been meditating quite a lot were more able to distinguish between the activity in their visual and auditory cortex prior to the sound or the light flashing than others. which gives us this little idea that maybe they just have a little bit more expanded sense of consciousness, perhaps even in time. One of the ways that we look into these phenomena in the laboratory is we use and we develop scientific methods that try to make it so people can't cheat. So at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, for example, we had a very large 2,000-pound steel box that people would sit inside of. And we knew that there were no radio signals or cell signals that could come in and out between the box, so they couldn't be getting any sort of hints from other people. We'd put people in a separate room and we'd have them look at each other on video rather than being in person. And that often would show some response, even if the recipient was sitting in the steel box and didn't know when the person was paying attention to them or not. Sometimes their physiology would change when the other person was paying attention to them through the video feed and not. So those kinds of things are ways that in the lab we can try to capture these phenomena. Well, for the future of meditation research, it's important to take a multi-pronged approach. So one is objective measures, where we as scientists are trying to get at objective phenomena that it doesn't matter what the person says happens or not, we know what's happening, right? Then there's another form of information that sometimes people call this third person, second person, and first person. So third person is, this is an objective measure. I'm measuring your EEG or your heart rate, and you may not know what condition you're in, so it doesn't rely on your subjective experience. Second person is someone else observing the person and maybe coding or writing down what they see in the person. And first person is you telling your experience, your story. And if we use all three of these, that's the most powerful way to do it. Not just the third person, not just the first person, not just observing, but putting them all together and saying, they said it happened, somebody else said it happened, and the machine said it happened. That's the strongest.